Hi, this is Corella again, and today I'm here talking about an experiment that I'm doing. It's not an experiment because I don't think I'm experimenting on students, but I'm teaching my Spanish class a little bit differently. And let me tell you how I'm teaching them. I'm teaching them the subjunctive. Verb mood, because it's not a tense, a verb mood that usually students are taught, I don't know when, maybe in the third or fourth semester, maybe even later than that, maybe third or fourth year. And I think that's wrong, because the subjunctive is an extremely important part of Spanish. And I argue that if you don't know the subjunctive, you don't know Spanish. You can't speak the language. You definitely can't understand it, because you can't understand songs, you can't understand movies, a lot of books you can't understand, because it's such an important part. It's an important part of English also, but we don't notice it, because it's not marked like other verb moods are, right? And when something is not marked, you don't notice it. You think it's one thing, in reality it's another. If I said to you, if I had $5, I would go to the store. And to a lot of students, if I said that first part of the sentence, that dependent clause, if I had, and I would say, what tense is that? And they would say, or what mood is that? First place, they wouldn't even understand if I said mood. But if I said to them, what tense or mood is that? They would say, well, it's the past. Or if I say to you, if I were you, or if I was, because I don't say if I was you, but some people do say if I was you. But if I say if I were you, I would not do that. And once again, I say the first part of the sentence, if I were or if I was you, what tense or mood is that? They would say, well, it's the past. And I said, that's funny. When was I you and when were you me? And that's when they think and say, wait a minute. And it's not if I is with was. Why do you say if I were? And why does that sound right? So the first thing I do is explain the subjunctive in English, which is very difficult to do because we don't usually, depending on what school you go to, but generally speaking, we don't usually break our language down like this. Okay. But we have to learn how to, so we can understand everything in a sentence. So when you look at a sentence, you understand what mood it's in, and you understand the tense, and you understand the parts of speech and everything. So I wrote down here verbs, because that's what we're talking about, basically verbs. Okay. And then looking at the difference between a verb tense, which in Espanol is los tiempos del verbo, or el tiempo del verbo, and the verb mood, el modo, the way the verb is in the sentence. Not having to do with the time, because tense has to do with the time. So for example, I eat every day, but right now I am eating. And yesterday I ate, and for many, many years I have eaten, right? And tomorrow I will eat, okay? Or tomorrow I will be eating. Those are tenses, because you're telling me basically about the time that you do the action. But a mood is different. So let's look at the moods in English. Some of them you're going to recognize instantly. The one you're not going to recognize, and this is the ironic part, is the one that I'm teaching and is the one that is the most important, the subjunctive. So let's just look at it. You have the indicative mood. The indicative mood is what we normally use when we're stating a reality or we're talking about a fact. And I give an example, I speak English. That's a reality, that's a fact. It's not my opinion, it's none of that, it's just a fact. You're indicating what you do, or you're indicating what is. So that's why it's called the indicative. In Espanol se llama indicativo, right? Now, the indicative can come in. It could be the present indicative. Sometimes I've even heard people call it the past indicative, which is usually the simple past, or in Spanish is el pretérito. Or you can have the future indicative, right? Or many people just call it the simple future. Then you have another mood, it's called the imperative. The imperative is when you are demanding, commanding, or instructing someone to do something. Not always demanding or commanding. Let me give you an example of a command or a demand. When you say to someone, let's say, for whatever reason, you look at that person and you say, speak English. That is very different than I speak English, you speak English, he, she, it speaks English, right? That's very different than to say to somebody, speak English. If you notice, I don't even put the subject. I don't say you speak English, I just put speak English, because that's how we construct the imperative in English. But it's not just the imperative, it's not just a demand and command. You will see it in recipes or when you're instruction, right? When you are being instructed how to cook something, they'll say, first, pour the liquid in the bowl. Number 2, fry eggs or something. I don't cook. Do this, do that, do the other. But they're not commanding you. They're instructing you. But the way we instruct in English is through the command. It's through the imperative. But you know the difference when somebody says to you, pour the water in the bowl versus pour water in the bowl now. You know those are two different ways. You're using the same structure, but you're saying by the mood two different things. Okay. Then there's the other mood is the interrogative. And the interrogative is just what it says. It's when you are asking a question. When you are asking a question. So, do you speak English? Do you speak Spanish? Right? So you are questioning, and at the end of that sentence, unlike at the end of the indicative and the imperative, at the end of the interrogative, you have a question mark. Sometimes at the end of the imperative, you might also have an exclamation mark. It depends on what you're saying. Then there's the conditional. That's another mood. The conditional, when you're saying that one action can only be done if another action happens first. Right? So one action is conditioned on another action. And here's an example. If I lived in the United States, I would speak English. But because I don't live in the United States, I don't speak English. So speaking English is dependent or it's conditioned on where you live. So these are marked. These are marked very clearly, right? Each one of these are marked in such a way that you would recognize them. Maybe not as moods, but you recognize the indicative, you recognize the imperative, you recognize the interrogative, you recognize the conditional, because there's something in the sentence that tells you that one is not the other. 500 years ago, we did use the subjunctive, right? We use the subjunctive a lot. But now we use them only in very formulaic sentences. Or if we do use it, people think we're speaking the language incorrectly. Let me give you a sentence that you've heard, that you know, but you probably don't know is a subjunctive. Right? Because a subjunctive is talking about a desire or a wish that you have of someone else's action. So there's a difference in saying, I speak English. You're talking, that's indicative, you're talking about what you do, versus I want you. Now I'm talking about what I want from you, an action that I want from you. That action that I want from you is in the subjunctive. But not in English, because in English it's just in the infinitive. So, I want you to speak English. So you don't notice it. You don't note it. The closest I could get would be, I want that you speak English, but we don't say it that way. We normally say, I want that. I want you to speak English. But let me give it to you in a more formulaic, and you'll recognize it. God bless you. That's a subjunctive. That's not the indicative. You're not talking about a reality. You're not talking about a command. You're not asking a question. It's not conditional. It's what you want God to do for someone else. God bless you. Another one, long live the king. Once again, it's not indicative, it's not imperative, it's not interrogative, it's not conditional. You are saying what you want the king to do. You want the king to live a long life. That's a subjunctive. Because if this were the indicative, God bless you, it would be, if I'm stating a reality, it would be God blesses you. Right? Long live the king would be, I hope that the king lives long. But nobody says that. People say, I don't know if you've ever heard, be by, long live the king, right? I'm giving you a sentence in the indicative, and in the subjunctive, and it's going to sound wrong, but it's right, right? I hope, because this is a desire that you have now for someone else, that he be elected. That be is the subjunctive. I'll come back because the video is running a little bit longer than I would like. I'll come back and we'll talk about it more. Once again, this is Coralla Ficklin-McLean, and I'm talking about one of my favorite things in teaching in English, the subjunctive. Thank you so much. Bye.